Yeah, so I went all the way through secondary school, college with no epilepsy or anything like that. Very heavily into sports, and when I was in my early 20s, I was playing a game of rugby. Probably got heavily knocked around and everything. Took a couple of smelling salts and carried on, but it was just the way it was back then. And I think it happened even the following weekend. I played 2 consecutive games of rugby, and I went to drive off, and eventually I drove off into the golf course. And even at the time, I assumed I'd had a beer, got tested, hadn't had a beer, but it was just assessed as tiredness as such, and so life carried on. And back then there wasn't much publications or options of epilepsy. There was no internet. I'm talking back in the late 80s. And so from that stage then I carried on over to Europe, and it wasn't until I was driving a van around in England, I think it was, and after a night out with the lads, and at one stage the boys were talking to me and I wasn't even communicating with them, and they realised I wasn't even with it, and so they kicked my feet off the pedals and let the van just run to a stop, and went, oh God, next time Grubs, just if you're feeling tired, don't drive, and it was just there was no real understanding of what was actually happening.
Yeah.
And then I believe I did it again when we were in Europe, and then the boys made an assessment, hey, no more driving, sort things out with you. And they thought it was a benefit to my part because I could just go out partying all the time, don't worry about getting up early in the morning. Anyway, so it wasn't until later on, eventually I was back in England at the time, and I fell over and fell into a bus and cut my lip open sort of thing, and I went into the hospital, and they eventually came to the assessment that they believed that there was something else had triggered it from a mental perspective, in my brain then, and they came up with the assessment that I was epileptic. And so that was quite a shock, because just like in the old days, no one knew anything about that. I had the one kid at my school, the college I went to, who was epileptic, and at the time you didn't even understand then what was happening done. And so even when I was assessed it, there wasn't any Google. You listen to a doctor turn around and tell you what was wrong with you, and you go, oh well, what do I have to do and what happens next? And so I remember communicating with my mates and just saying, apparently I'm epileptic, I might fall on the ground and wriggle around and just try and keep me clear of anything. And that was about as much briefing as you got back in those days. It seemed to be ignited when I was pushed quite hard, when I did a lot of work. I worked quite heavily when I was in England, and also like out partying and flashing lights. And so as a youngster going to all the nightlife and all that sort of thing, and you're very tired and flashing, and it's something that seemed to censor me. And so as I went along, I had a lot of experiences of when I had the occasional, and I was having a lot of more petite mouths, but they were just more, something had triggered it. Yeah. And I eventually got to the friend with my ex-wife, who was extremely supportive of everything that I've been through, and especially one of my mates. They sort of knew that when I was feeling funny, and like I'm not into star signs or anything, but I'm a Gemini, and I used to get this feeling of doubles and twins, and I could feel it was like a tingle running through you that something was about to happen. And I used to be able to just indicate to one of those two that, hey, I think I'm about to go. And at the time, when I was having petite mouths, I'd just sit there and I'd probably stare straight through you. I'd lick my lips a lot, obviously unaware of noise or anything in conversation that was going on, and then I'd come back, and you could tell I was blank as and just didn't know what was happening. And so one of my friends, my ex-wife, would pull me aside, just let me know what sort of happened. No one else would even be aware of it. It was just quite trivial at that stage, and so that's where I go. But obviously got to the stage where pushing it too hard, working in that, and unaware of any precautionary things. So I'd been assessed that you're epileptic, and that was it, and life moved on. And so I just carried on having fits, and it was one of them things at my office. I had a bed that I could go into, and one solution I found in those days was to, if I was like it, if I was feeling a bit fuzzy, we'll call it, I'd go into the dark room and just lie on the floor. And it seemed like a semi-solution, but it was probably just a way of calming everything down.